buenas tardes a todos. Soy la penúltima charla. Sé que estáis desesperados por salir de aquí, así que media horita más luego blockchain y saldremos. Antes de empezar la charla, I'm going to switch to English. The reason why is because English is my native professional language, and if I try to do this talk in Spanish, you'd be wondering whether you're at the CTO Summit or attending an intense course in Spanglish. So I'll switch to English. As I mentioned, I'm with the infrastructure team at GitLab. And actually, I'm not going to talk about the thing that is shown in the program. And the reason why is because when Jaume and Paula got in touch with me to come and speak, I was actually literally standing to board a flight from New Orleans to San Francisco. And they're like, hey, we need a topic right now. Can you talk about automation? And I'm like, sure. I've only slept for an hour and I'm gonna get on an airplane. But anyway, when I started thinking about what I really wanted to talk about, I decided that automation was interesting, but I know you can read a ton of blogs about it. So I'm sorry to disappoint our gracious host, but I won't be telling you a whole lot about technology. However, I will be talking about the humans, because I think the humans are the most important link in any automation toolchain. I don't really care which tools you have, which frameworks you've adopted. If the humans are not in a good state, then you won't be able to succeed. And so I'm going to share the story of the last 12 months at GitLab. If you're familiar with us, you probably remember that 2017, 2018, we had a few bad events. And things are different now, so I want to walk you through how we made it. Do I need to point this somewhere? This is not working. ¿Ah? Con el otro botón. Ah, great. It's upside down. Fantastic. So, a year ago, June 4th, 2018, it was going to be my first day at GitLab. I took 2 weeks off, and I made it a point to disconnect. And I was very successful, because when I showed up to work on that Monday, I had heard nothing about the GitHub acquisition by Microsoft. So when I showed up, I started talking to some people. It was 10 a.m. here in Spain. Welcome, here is your onboarding kit, here is your laptop, here is your email account, your Slack account, your other accounts. And they actually neglected to give me the thing that I would need the most that day. Because that day turned out to be a very intense day for the entire company. For me, initially, it was very, very frustrating because I'd been at the company for 2 hours and there was literally nothing I could do. In fact, if I tried to interact with people, the only thing I would be doing is getting on their way. So I took a step back and I essentially became a plant. Except plants were more useful because they produced oxygen and I was just simply consuming oxygen. But it gave me a great opportunity to observe the team in action under a lot of stress. The number of projects that migrated from GitHub to GitLab that day was 1 or 2 orders of magnitude higher than usual. So GitLab.com was under a lot of stress. And again, I could do nothing, but I just observed. I got on the video call for the incident and I followed Slack. And I was just kind of figuring out who was who was the leader, who was having ideas to deal with the incident, et cetera, et cetera. So it gave me a lot of information and I tried to make the most out of it. And the rest of that week, things sort of taper off and they got back to normal. For some value of normal. Because then, June 12th happened. I believe it was a Tuesday, and we had a planned maintenance on the databases. It was a simple maintenance. We were just doing a simple thing to the secondaries. And it turns out that as we do the maintenance, our secondaries get obliterated. They stop working, which essentially caused the primary to melt. This caused a 4-hour downtime in which initially, I figured we'd be back in an hour or so because we'd already created several secondaries. Surely the automation could take care of this. But no, it took us a long time. And we didn't really have a clear process to recover these secondaries. So we tried multiple things in parallel. And eventually, we got back online and things got to a functional state. But it was very draining to watch the team just sort of go through that exercise of chaos and madness and let's try this and let's try that. How could this happen? How could a company like GitLab, which makes a great product for DevOps, that uses great technology? I mean, we weren't using like random stuff. We used Terraform, Chef, like name brand and well-respected technologies. How could we miss the return codes from a script that would obliterate all of our secondaries in one single Swift? And then it came to me after observing the team work under pressure, after talking to people, it came to me that actually the source of the problem wasn't really the tooling, but that there was something that was affecting people and how they used that tooling, which was making our operation of GitLab.com unsafe. So I started focusing on that. The first thing that I did is I sort of reset our focus. And as you read this sentence, a relentless focus on GitLab.com observable availability, you may be thinking, well, duh, this is obvious. You want your site to be available. But I realized that the team was actually more focused on speed of change. How many things can we get done in a single day than whether we were doing safe things that would actually move us forward. So I felt that it was necessary to change that focus and to be very explicit about it. The second thing that I looked at is this is the structure of the team when I joined. There was one team called production engineering and one team called database engineering. And as you can see, the shapes are slightly different. And this is because as I saw this structure, which is actually fairly common, we tend to align things functionally when we create organizations, but this raised the question in my head, which was rhetorical in some ways. Are the databases not production? I mean, I have a team that is doing production engineering, and then I have this lump on the side that is doing the databases. That just seems odd to me. So the first few steps is make availability an explicit driver inside the department, inside the team, to the company, and then to the outside world. Because from the point of view of reputation, I don't think anyone really believed that we took automation very seriously. Then I wanted to align the axis, essentially focal groups and functional areas, make sure they're correctly aligned. If you think about production, that's an attribute of your environment. But if you think about databases, that is a function of your environment. So to have a team that is focused on an attribute and a team that is focused on a component, just there is some misalignment there in the organization that needs to be addressed. And then obviously we were on the ICU at this point. I mean, we were in really bad shape for GitLab.com. And I'll share some uptime numbers later. So we introduced some operational discipline, change management, incident management, to essentially try and optimize our change speed, make sure that the changes that we were inflicting on production were done at a safe rate. So if you take the original box and you turn it 90 degrees, we started thinking whether does it make sense to actually do away with this production and this database thing. Everybody's working on production, and obviously the databases are part of production. And whether we can have two teams. Site availability engineering on one hand, which is what I call the duct tape team. Their sole purpose in life is to essentially make sure that GitLab.com stays up no matter what. If that means that you need to MacGyver your way out of a problem, then you do that. We'll come and clean up later. And that is essentially what the second team was supposed to do. They would take the duct tape out of whatever fix we had deployed, and then they would produce a machine part that would replace, the quick fix that we did. So the idea is site availability is focusing on the now, what's going on now in production. And if there is an issue, we're just gonna fix it, whatever it takes. The solution doesn't have to be pretty. We just want to make sure that we stay functional. And then site reliability would focus on making sure that those solutions will actually be longer term solutions, which at times meant they would replace whatever the fix was and put something in place that was better suited for the test of time. So in turning that, the decision is we're going to put DBREs and SREs in the same team. So they're going to become peers. They're not going to be reporting to different managers. If you think about it, when there's an escalation from the database folks, they would talk to their manager, who in turn would go and talk to the production engineering manager, who then would talk to somebody in production engineering, and then the lag time on that process was just huge. So the idea was break down the silos, make them peers, put them in a position where they can help each other. They don't have to check on priorities. They know what their priorities are because they're in the same team. Then we also hire a manager with deep database experience. And the general idea here was that we wanted to have a voice for the database folks at the manager's table. If you think about it, most managers come from a developer background or a systems background. And usually the database managers continue their management career managing database teams. But I didn't want that to be the case. And so what we ended up doing is, yes, we hire someone to sort of represent the point of view of the database and make sure that that view was represented at the manager's table, but we also made sure that database projects were actually spread out through multiple managers. So this one person wasn't by default the person that was handling all database projects. So on day 14, 2 weeks after I started, I did my first reorg, because why not? And so here you can see site availability and site reliability. And essentially, if you look at that timeline at the bottom, site availability is focused on the now. What's going on now, and how do I make sure that GitLab.com stays up? And then site reliability was sort of coming behind and cleaning things up. So for me, that was a personal record. I'd never been in a company where I could just reorg my entire organization in 2 weeks. But I'll talk about why that was actually possible at GitLab. And it has to do with one of our values, which is iteration. We tend to be experimental. And obviously we do that with the product, but we also can expand that into how we put the company together, how we run the company, how we structure the company. Oops, one too many. 9 days later, we added this sort of box with dotted lines because we realized that if we kept this structure for very long, then the people inside availability would only know how to duct tape things, and then the people inside reliability would be perceived as the really smart people, the ones that are building great automation. So we put a rotation in place. We wanted to make sure that people were actually living both sides of this equation, where people would live in the now and would deal with problems in GitLab.com immediately, but also at a later time, they could actually work on longer-term solutions. So that structure actually was the structure that contributed to us being able to pull off the GCP migration. We moved from Azure to GCP. By the time I got to GitLab, that project was 2 or 3 months late. And in 2 months, this team, these changes, along with lots of contributions from the rest of the company, allowed us to pull this off on August 11th, which was an immense dopamine hit for the team. And it was a well-earned victory for the entire team. We kept that structure until about late October of last year, when we added what we call the delivery team. This is kind of a special, different team that was added to the infrastructure department. It is different in that it's an ephemeral team. This team is tasked with implementing continuous delivery at GitLab. And if you heard me say that, you're probably blinking and you'll probably be asking me about this later at the party. But yes, we internally were not using continuous delivery, even though our product actually supports that. So we put this team together, and it's ephemeral because it's a long-term project, and it's a difficult project, but it's a project that has a beginning and an end. We will be in continuous delivery, and then we won't have to have this team anymore. But it does follow some of the principles of mixing various functions in the same team. So the delivery team actually encompasses initially 2 SREs and 2 backend developers, because there were problems both on the infrastructure side and the development side that needed to be solved. The net result of this, of all these changes, plus the operational discipline that I talked about, before we migrated, we had downtimes every day, essentially. We did something or something happened, and the site would be down. Post-migration, which is when we started measuring this, we moved to almost 2 weeks. So that was a marked improvement. I mean, the fact that you were waking up every day and just trying to figure out in which interesting way are we going to destroy the site today, that moved to be a bi-weekly thought. So that was a marked improvement. Since things were now stable, early this year in January, we actually ended the whole site availability thing. We gained enough maturity as an organization to not have to go around with duct tape. We made enough gains that we could now predict more failure modes, and we could react to them before they actually hit us. It doesn't mean we have a perfect hit ratio, but we've gotten way better. And also the team had grown. We now had enough people where we needed 3 managers. So what we ended up doing is we ended up splitting the team into 3 reliability engineering teams. We still have the delivery team in there, but one of the changes that happened in February is that we added 2 more developers to that team. Now, I mentioned earlier, the delivery team is doing continuous delivery, implementing it, and there are 2 SREs and 2 developers working on that. We added 2 more developers because GitLab actually develops a product that is run in self-managed instances. And there's actually a number of you who run the product, so thank you. And then there is GitLab.com, but we use the same exact code base. We didn't split the code bases. So the thing that happens is GitLab.com is by far the largest instance of GitLab in operation on the planet. It's actually bigger than all other instances combined. So we found that we needed 2 people that were focused on taking some of the code that was coming in and ensuring that it could work for the scale of GitLab.com. This is the current structure of the team, and I'm sure at some point we'll make some changes. Like I said, delivery is an ephemeral team. In fact, I'm happy to report that continuous delivery is now a reality inside of GitLab since early June, and we're still working through some kinks, but it's definitely made our lives more interesting and long-term, hopefully much better. I added this slide here because we use GitLab values. If you're familiar with the company and if you're familiar with how we operate, one of our values is radical transparency. So you can go read our handbook and you can see the issues that teams are working on. But there are 3 important values that I think apply to our history over the last 12 months. One of them is results. The changes that we made resulted in uptime that is way more stable. And the last self-inflicted serious incident that we had was 7 months ago, whereas we were having them nearly on a weekly basis. Also, in terms of collaboration, the team is healthy, and the feedback from the team itself is that we feel better, we feel safer, and that shows in the quality of the work that they're doing. And finally, iteration. I showed you 4 versions of what my team has looked like over the last 12 months, and I'm sure that's going to change as the team grows, as GitLab.com grows, as we try and meet new challenges. We will continue to iterate on the team structure. So what is that next iteration? I don't know yet, but I do know 3 things that are going to be fundamental to making that happen. The first one is that people are always priority number 0. Healthy teams deliver, and you want to have healthy teams. You want to take care of people. You want to make sure they come to work and that they feel safe and that they feel they're contributing and building something important and that they're not actually being crushed by the weight of drama, if you will. The second thing is availability is always priority number 1. And we're starting to think about how we deliver GitLab with an SRE mindset. I added a link to a presentation that Theo Schlossnagel of Zirconos did at SRECon in February in New York. They have their own story. I'm not going to rehash that story. You should go watch that presentation. But we're adopting some of the principles that Theo shared in how we are contributing as an infrastructure group back into GitLab, the product. And then the third one, and this one is actually very important to all of us, is part of our values as well, and it's near and dear to our CEOs, to Sid, is use more GitLab to run GitLab.com. We already do a lot of that, but we need to do more because we're trying to build a product that helps our users operate their services and build their software and essentially deliver the service that they want to deliver. So we try to live through that as well. And this is where the SRE mindset and dogfooding get highly intertwined. We in infrastructure for a long time were receivers of the product. now we've become full participants in the product. So some solutions that we're building to operate GitLab.com are finding their way back into GitLab, the product, which is fantastic and very exciting. And that is it. It's been an exciting 12 months for me, and maybe next year, if we do it again, I can tell you the other 8 iterations that we've done. Questions, comments?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I love that we're switching to English all the time.
Podría hacer esto en español, pero iba a ser...
Hey, preaching to the choir here.
No, I'm not
Questions,
preaching.
preguntas. Anyone? No one?
I see one over there.
Oh, over there. They're at the back. You see, Chaume, this is a good example that we should do things in English because people just are doing it naturally. We still have one
25
talk.
years in the US
Alberto,
will do
you
that
think
to
you can
you.
deliver in English? Yeah? Shall we do it in English, the last one? Guys?
Hello.
All right. Question over there.
Hi. So I remember that maybe 3 or 4 years ago, probably you weren't around, right? There was an incident on GitLab, and developers were broadcasting live the fix for a few hours, and I was actually watching it, and I think this matches quite well what you mentioned about heavy transparency. Is it currently, do you apply the same policy still for this kind of live issues? Because it's a bit, I found it interesting, but from a developer perspective, it's probably quite threatening, right?
No, we don't do that to that extreme anymore. We still, whenever we have an incident, you can see the incident issue and you can see how the things that we're doing to it. But we actually made this turn when we did the GCP migration. We intended to broadcast that live because we felt it was a useful exercise. But when you're doing very complex work or solving a problem, if people are feeling watched, that adds some uneasiness, especially to some, the team has grown immensely. So we have the variety of personalities that we have in the team today is quite diverse. So not everybody feels happy to be on video while they're trying to fix the site. Also, sometimes there are screen sharing through the video call. So it's already happened where you'll see a private key screen, past the screen. So we decided that security-wise, there was nothing significant to be gained by broadcasting these things anymore. So we don't do that anymore. But we still, again, the issues are public. What we're doing is public. And then we usually, especially for severe incidents, we'll write a blog post. And then if you find me in a conference and you ask me about it, I'll tell you anything you want to know about it. So we're still super transparent, just not live.
Indeed.
So if they give you a beer tonight, you'll share, right?
The beer?
If they give you a beer tonight and they ask, you'll share.
The story? They don't even have to give me a beer for that.
The secrets.
No. I mean,
The secrets.
Actually, we're probably one of the least secret companies on the planet. And we take that very seriously. So.
One more question, guys? Have any other questions? No? Okay.
Sweet.
Well, Gerardo,
Thank you very
so
much.
much. Muchas gracias, caballero.
Gracias.